Kakalosh Boker or Bekiim Halacha 5. This is Siman 32, Lamed Bet, day 26, Halacha Kuf Yud Gimel. We're talking about 113, which is margins in the parchment. The scribe, we're talking about now the sofer, must leave a blank margin on the top of the parchment, at least wide enough to enable him to write the letter Lamed. Okay, that means according to what he writes, his letters, without the letter touching the top of the edge of the parchment, which means that the top of it has to be a little bit empty, that you could take a Lamed. Remember, the Lamed is the tallest letter, right? So he says on the bottom, he must leave a margin wide enough and able to write the letter Kaf Sofit or Nun Sofit without the letters touching the bottom of the edge of the parchment. No margin at all is necessary on the right side of the parchment where he begins the line, or on the left side. He must only make sure that no letter touches the edge of the parchment on the inside, because the halacha says you always need mukaf kvil, meaning you always need that the letter is surrounded by parchment. So if you have the lamed or whatever letter that you want on the right side or on the left side, and the letter goes until the end, so that means the last part of the letter is not touching parchment. So that's not mukaf gvil. Mukaf gvil means that it's not surrounded by parchment, and therefore it's not going to be kosher. So that's what you have to have. But other than that, you don't need a certain measurement. But on the top and the bottom, you need a certain measurement. Okay, 94. The custom of Ashkenazi tribes to leave wider margin on all four sides, right? Described here. See the Mishabra, the Lechabura. The Kol Yaakov testified that the custom in Baghdad was described here just like Manan. No, meaning on the sides, you don't need anything. It's only on top and bottom. Next, 114. There must be a hair's breadth of space between each letter and each word. Okay, if the space is slightly wider than that, it is all right, unless the space is so wide that a child would say that there are two words instead of one. Meaning, mamash, you have a very little space in between. But if it's going to be too big of a space, maybe a child will read two different words. That's a problem. Okay, the space between each word must be as wide as the letter Yod, according to the size of letters in the scroll. If the space is narrower than this, it must be shown to a child. If he claims that there's only one word in that place, it's not kosher. Meaning that if the child is going to come, he's going to say, it's one word. It's a problem. So you have to be very meticulous, right, about the spaces. Right? What about repairing the scroll? If a child reads two words as one, because the space between them is too narrow, it might still be possible to salvage the scroll. For example, the scribe wrote the words al ken, too close, and they appear al lachen, right, or whatever is al kan. A scribe can carefully scrape away a bit from the left end of the lamed and a bit from the right side of the kaf, right, to widen the space between them. He must also be able to add a bit of the ink, right, to make the ayin closer to the lamed and the kaf closer to the nun sofit. In this way, the space between the lamed and the kaf is emphasized more. These steps do not violate the rule of shelo kesidran. If the child now recognizes that there are two words, it's kosher. If the space between the two words is too narrow, but the last letter of the word is a sofit letter, so some poskim also rule that the scroll is kosher, since it is obvious that the first word ends right with that letter, and the following letter is another one. The Kol Yaakov rule that one may rely upon this opinion if the problem occurs in Tefilin scrolls of mezuzah, and the above strategies are insufficient. The Lechabura rules stringently that we cannot rely upon it at all. You understand what he said? Meaning, like, if the first one, instead of al, let's say it was kach, some kaf, so there's a kaf sofit, and then it's the next one. You already know that since there's a kaf sofit, it's the end of the word. It looks like one word, yeah, but you know it's the end of the word. So again, you have what to rely on. He says, no, but you have what to rely on. For this case, the child must be one who knows how to read words besides recognizing each letter, but he does not understand the content of the verse he's shown. He should be shown the line containing the doubtful word and has to read the words from the end of the line, the left end, to the beginning on the right. Meaning he's reading backwards. He's not reading forwards. And you take him backwards and you tell him start reading. You understand? What's this word? What's this word? Because you don't want to go forwards. Because sometimes if he goes forwards, he could already know what's going on. So if you go backwards. Okay? Yeah. Space in between the lines. The space between one line of words and the line beneath should be as wide as one line. The common custom to accept Tefilin scrolls regardless of how much or a little space is provided between the things. Look at 96. The Achronim explained that this space between the lines are necessary only in Torah scrolls. The Kesed HaSofer recommended taking care of the same thing in lines of Tefillin or Mezuzot as well. The scribe does not leave them much space between them. He's going to be forced to shape the letters like a Kaf Sofit or Lamed shorter than the Halacha prescribes. So therefore, obviously, it's better to do it this way. Okay? Next, 117. The space between two verses should not be any wider than the space between two words, meaning the width of a letter Yod. Meaning, in between one pasuk and another, you're not supposed to leave more space than between one word and another. Because if not, think about it. You know, I could teach you every sof pasuk. You know how I do it? Every time there's a sof pasuk, the end of a pasuk, make a larger space. And then Bal Koreh, he's reading, he knows it's a sof pasuk. You can't. It has to be the exact same space, the sof pasuk, to between one word and another word. So you can't differentiate between them. Okay? 97. 97 says the Ramah ruled that the space between the two verses should be a bit wider than the space between the words. The Magen Avraham countered that it's incorrect to do this, since the Gemara teaches that we no longer know where each verse Torah ends. Although it might help the person regarding the Torah, if there's a signifying right to obviously the end of each verse, the common custom is to do the exact same thing. The Piskei Teshuvot adds that if someone wishes to follow the ruling of the Ramah, he must make sure that the spaces he leaves between the verses, right, are less than 3 letters wide. This is because Rabbeinu Tam ruled that a space which is going to be 3 letters at the end of a parasha, and it would render the scroll not kosher according to Rabbeinu Tam. If such a space is found in a scroll that was already written, it's kosher since we follow the opinion that the space at the end of the parasha is going to be kosher as long as it's going to be 9 letters long. If someone leaves a space as long as 9 letters, right, between the verses, the scroll is not kosher. It can be repaired by lightening a letter to shorten the space, right, or by piercing the blank space in the parchment with a needle. See above in Halacha 86 and 87.